Good Abend. Welcome in Maastricht. I'm standing here in the most southerly city in the Netherlands, the university city of Maastricht, here by the River Meuse, spanned by the oldest bridge in the Netherlands, the 12th century St. Saarbr&uuml. We're here today to start a new adventure. We've done how far can you get by bus in 24 hours, we've done how far can you get by train in 24 hours. Today, we're starting Europe 24. How many countries can I visit by public transport in 24 hours? This is the borderlands. This is as far south as the Netherlands get, the province of Limburg. So this is a great place to start. Now obviously we need some rules for this challenge. Firstly, I'm making your life easy for myself. I can start anywhere I like, and I can start at any time I like. So actually, whilst it's a beautiful city and I'm looking forward to spending the evening here, I'm not going to start here. I'm going to head 10 minutes south to the little village of Eijsden, right on the Belgian border. 10 minutes in hand might come in useful later on. Secondly, what can I travel on? Trains, buses, coaches, trams, boats, pretty much anything that goes on the surface, as long as it's not a car or a taxi or an aeroplane. And thirdly, what do I mean when I say I'm visiting a country? I can't just pass through on an express train. I need to actually change. I need to arrive and depart on a different vehicle. The exception to that rule is the first country and the last country. For those of us of a certain age, the name Maastricht is inextricably linked with a treaty, with the single currency, with the social chapter, and with a series of parliamentary rebellions that brought down a conservative government. Maastricht's name is set in history through all that. But it's also an absolutely beautiful town. And before I head down to Eijsden to start this challenge, I'd like to show you a few parts of it.
The first sign that there might be something quite special about Maastricht is its fantastic, just pre-World War I railway station. As befits the provincial capital of majority Catholic Limburg, it's quite a high church. The stained glass, the soaring vaulted roof, the balconies are no particular purpose. But this is Netherlands after all, so underneath it isn't hellfire and brimstone, but a vast sheltered bike park, complete with travellators for cyclists and an on-site bike mechanic. Just over the bridge and we find a genuine church, 13th century Dominican Gothic pile, which itself was once used as a bike park, but is now one of Europe's most dramatic bookshops. This may be firmly Northern Europe, but as a southern extremity of the Netherlands, there's what passes for a Dutch Latinate vibe to this town, with its handsome squares lined with cafe terraces. And it's nearly Christmas, or rather, it's nearly St. Nicholas Eve, on the 5th of December, which is the main Dutch celebration, so the whole place is decked in tasteful decorations. To fortify myself for the long night, day and part of a night ahead, I'm going to join the cafe culture and celebrate the fluid national boundaries of this corner with a huge plank of Belgian cheeses and a Trappist beer. Mrs. Turtle is delighted they provide some parsley with the cheese. But the night is wearing on, so it's time to head back across the river and hop down to Eijsden to begin the challenge proper. Eijsden, 10 minutes from Maastricht, is the most southerly village in the Netherlands and has a claim to also being the oldest. It's a damp, cobblestone sort of place, silent at 10:30 as the mist creeps up from the river. The river is the border with Belgium here, the Maas this side, the Meuse on the other, and in the daytime I could bag a country via a quick ferry ride. But tonight there's just the cry of waterfowl and the roar of heavy industry on the Belgian bank. Eijsden station looks like your average Dutch halt, the usual paving, signage, fonts and cycle stands. But it has the distinction of being served only by trains run by the Belgian State Railway. Indeed, it closed in 2006 because the Belgians started running trains that were too long for its platforms. Fortunately for Eijsden and me, they reverted to short local trains 5 years later and the station reopened. There's just me and Mrs. Turtle waiting on the silent platform tonight for the almost midnight train going anywhere, or more specifically to Liège. It's 23:58, our train is spot on time and we're starting the 24-hour clock. Every hour, one of these little Belgian trains shuttles the 35 kilometres between Maastricht and Liège, A useful cross-border hop for me, apparently a vehicle of deep suspicion for the Belgian authorities, who dislike its frequent use to transport drugs from liberal Limburg to not-so-liberal Liège. It's hardly the wire on here tonight though, and within 4 minutes we're pulling into Visé in Belgium, which means we can chalk up the Netherlands as done. It gets harder from here. Usually the Netherlands borders the Flemish, Dutch-speaking parts of Belgium, but here, because the Maastricht salient pushes so far south, is a rare location where we cross straight into French-speaking Wallonia, and just a few minutes down the line we're rumbling over the Meuse and into Wallonia's largest city, Liège. Liège-Guillemins station is one of Europe's most iconic. Completely rebuilt in 2009 by celebrity architect Santiago Calatrava, it's monumental, awe-inspiring and always bloody freezing. The architecture sits well with the occasional high-speed train that calls here, but a bit more awkwardly with the bulk of trains which are formed of Belgium's utilitarian and somewhat run-down fleet of regional rolling stock, like our train from Eyston. Not that SNCB are strangers to great design, however. They got great use out of their classic B in an oval logo, designed for them in 1936 by Henry van der Velde, one of the nation's leading Art Nouveau practitioners. Few rail companies can claim such value for money from their design commissions. It's coming up to 1 AM and there's no more trains from Liège tonight, so to push onwards we're taking to the road on one of the vast network of lime green Flixbuses that course Europe's trunk roads day and night. Calatrava's Guillemins station cost €312 million. I'm estimating the Flixbus passenger facilities in the car park next door cost about 15. This conveniently timed coach makes a pit stop at Liège en route from Amsterdam to Zurich 4 nights a week. If it wasn't for my rules, I could tick off 4 countries on this coach alone. Oh well, hoist by my own petard. It's a bit disappointing to see a single-decker pull in when you've dished out a couple of euros extra to reserve the front upstairs seat, but I suppose when the next 100 miles is costing barely €10, I can't complain too much about ending up in a cramped aisle seat. The coach is so full, Mrs. Turtle has to go in the hold. Shame, she could have helped calm the unhappy baby who's everyone's favourite passenger at 1:30 AM. I can't see much, but we're powering through the misty Ardennes, skipping the stop at Bastogne, a town most famous for having its name mangled in American war movies. We're now in Luxembourg, but that's Luxembourg, Belgium. The Belgian province far exceeds the namesake country in area, if not in population and certainly not in GDP. It was split from the Grand Duchy in the Third Partition of Luxembourg in 1830. The details of the previous 2 partitions are far too well known to bother recounting here. But eventually, somewhere on the damp auto route, we cross the border into Luxembourg, and that's Belgium complete, and 2 countries ticked off. And slightly early, at just before 3 AM, we arrive at a park and ride on the edge of the 3rd country's capital. That is, I guess, Luxembourg, so small they named it thrice. I'm at Wyon Park and Ride, unaccountably named after the stock you put in soup if my A-level French serves me. It's a good 3 kilometres from Luxembourg Central Station, where I need to be next. No buses at this time of the morning, so time to fire up the Velo bike hire app, which wonderfully gives star ratings for each power-assisted bike available at the docking station here. Number 11 seems to be a user favourite, so I'll swipe right on that one. Luxembourg may have more cars per capita than any other nation on earth, but at 3 AM, the only other thing I'm seeing moving on the capital streets is a dust cart. With the power assist eating up Luxembourg's hills and an hour to make my connection, I'm going the slightly long way round to do a bit of sightseeing of the Petrus Gorge and the Bourbon fortifications, which together made the city so impregnable it was nicknamed the Gibraltar of the North. I've docked the bike safely away and left it a good review. Luxembourg's Grand Railway Station dates to an early 20th century economic boom fuelled by iron deposits in southern Luxembourg. The nation got rich, liked being rich, so opted to carry on being rich. Once again, however, we're not at a railway station for a train. Railway geography gives Luxembourg poor links into Germany, but the economics of the region mean there are lots of cross-border commuters seeking Luxembourg's salaries and German cost of living. So the chemin de fer luxembourgeois run a frequent express bus to Saarbr&uuml, which, luckily for me and 2 other passengers this morning, starts running at 4 a.m. Luxembourg, famously, made all its public transport free in 2020, except I've cleverly managed to use free modes in this country that I've had to pay for. Even the bike cost €2, but this bus would have cost €9 before 2020, and it's down to 5 now to pay for the German leg. All in all, it's a more relaxing ambience than the overcrowded Flixbus. We come within a minute of entering France, but veer off just before the frontier. But this is Luxembourg, so we aren't far from a border for long. Popping out of a motorway tunnel under the Markusberg, and we leap across the dark valley of the Moselle by the small town of Schengen, ticking off Luxembourg as we speed into Germany. Schengen, balanced at the tri-point of Luxembourg, France and Germany, is an appropriate place to cross a border on this journey. Without the eponymous agreement signed here in 1985 abolishing border controls in much of Europe, Europe 24 would struggle to visit as many nations in as short a time as we hope to. We're onto the racetrack-like, twisting autobahn following the meandering River Saar now, and just over an hour after leaving Luxembourg City, we're pulling into Saarbrücken, squeezed into the valley, and unmistakably a West German town that, as a major industrial centre and strategic railway junction, was flattened in the 1940s and rebuilt from scratch in the universal architectural style of the 1950s. Had I come here between 1949 and 56, I'd struggle to know what country I was ticking off. Was it the nominally independent Saar Protectorate with its own currency and football team? France, who effectively ran it as part of their occupation zone? Or basically West Germany? The politically neutral 15 stars on the European flag reflect that the Saarland's status was not settled at the time of its adoption by the Council of Europe. But it's definitely Germany now, and our visit to the Bundesrepublik is a short one, so we must take our pleasures quickly. Most importantly, fresh pretzels from the station bakery. It's a long time since that cheese plank in Maastricht. The bus from Luxembourg dropped us at the Hauptbahnhof, but we were actually waiting for our next leg onwards down by the red sandstone Johanneskirche in the historic town centre, because we're going to leave Germany on a rarity, an international tram train. And here's our ride, the 0640 to Saarbr&uuml. Since 1997, when the local German authorities clearly decided that the railway south down the Saar Valley wasn't being used enough, it was effectively a French rural line, so that's no surprise, Saarbrücken trams have been running through the streets of the city centre, then onto a mainline railway down to Saarbr&uuml, just over the border in France. So our tram stops in the middle of a roundabout, the driver radios for authorisation to clatter over onto the national rail network, and we're soon speeding along at an un-tram-like pace down the valley. And before long, we're rattling over the Saar and into France, ticking off Germany, country 4. At the French border station of Saarbr&uuml, we've got just 3 minutes to bustle through the subway for the Strasbourg train. Nowhere is it clear if this is meant to be a connection or not, but I and one other passenger make it. The air here thrums with idling diesel engines as trains express régionaux wait to set off on various wandering secondary lines deeper into Alsace. Only the German tram is electrified.
Mesdames, Messieurs, la région Grand Est et SNCF vous souhaite la bienvenue à bord de ce TER fluo à destination de Cribry-Méno.
The first 20 minutes of this journey through the pitch black of rural northeastern Alsace are slow, very slow. We crawl along what is clearly track in very poor condition, climbing painfully towards the summit tunnel at Puberg. At each stop we fill further with bleary-eyed school kids and well-wrapped-up Strasbourg-bound commuters. Slowly, the dawn breaks, grey at first, then a fiery line opening up above the distant outline of the Schwarzwald. Just over 6 hours into our challenge, and we're into our 5th country. I'm underslept, but also really pleased at how well we're utilising this country-heavy corner of Europe. Accelerating at last, we're soon speeding past the morning peak traffic jams on the approach to the Alsatian capital.
Mesdames, Messieurs, dans quelques minutes, notre train entre en gare de Strasbourg. Avant de descendre,
We're a bit late into Strasbourg and my 10-minute connection should be in jeopardy. I run through the subway, tripping painfully on the steps, notified my train south is delayed too. Those who follow me on train 24 will know this route. The semi-retired long-distance coaches, which once raced to the Mediterranean or the Massif Central, now shuttling comfortably along the Rhine plain between Strasbourg and Basel. Due to a locomotive issue, we leave Strasbourg 15 minutes late, just as we did on train 24. Should be fine. My connection at Basel is 30 minutes. Now, just to sit back and enjoy this ride along the foothills of the Vosges Mountains. Then, at Mulhouse, things start to go wrong. Due to the delay, the chef du train tells us they're turning this train at St. Louis. Merde.
les voyageurs de ont emprunté le TER à 9h40 à destination de Belgium de Saint-Louis.
St. Louis is within spitting distance of Basel, even though it's in France. There's even a tram across the border to Basel's main station, but there's nothing I can find to get me there in time for my planned onward connection to southeast Switzerland. Lots of urgent timetable juggling later, I realise I've got no choice but to drop a country. I'm finally leaving St. Louis on the next train from Strasbourg, but frustrated on a challenge with lots of tight connections, it's a half-hour one that has thrown a spanner. Mirroring my mood, the rhinos at Basel Zoo are hiding in their house today. But that does mean we're in Switzerland. Country 5 is ticked off. I'm half an hour down on my schedule now, but after Zurich, the way the timetables work, I'm going to be an hour adrift. I've worked out that Hungary is going to have to be the poor country sacrificed. Getting there was always going to be a stretch, but we should still make a high total. Spending a few moments in the great departure hall of Basel SBB is like meeting an old friend again. It reeks of historic journeys made and promises of great journeys yet to come. A much needed pick-me-up. For reasons known only to people other than me, the next Basel to Zurich intercity is formed of a double-deck French TGV today, despite this being a Swiss domestic shuttle. On the minus side, this means no restaurant car for a late second breakfast. On the positive, it provides a supremely comfortable viewing platform for a gentle swish through the cantons of Basel Landschaft, Solothurn and Aargau, where they're doing autumn properly. Just outside Alton, which is the Helvetic version of Crewe, we swish across the green glacial waters of the Aar, Switzerland's longest all-Swiss river, and then swing east towards Zurich.
Rien oublier à votre place. Afin de faciliter la suite de votre voyage, nous nous tiendrons sur le quai à votre disposition.
Trams and roast chestnuts are two of the highest forms of civilization, so good to see both outside Zurich Hauptbahnhof. I wasn't planning to even get off the train in Zurich, so a silver lining is a few minutes to hang out by the lovely Limmat River, gazing towards the distant twin towers of the Grossmünster. Richard Wagner said they looked like pepper dispensers. He's not actually wrong, really. But country counting waits for no one, and we need to head back to platform 7 for our train towards the mountainous southeast. It's a sparkling new double-deck intercity, and because this is Europe's best railway, I'm finally getting my restaurant car fix. Upstairs, natürlich.
Das Zugteam der SBB begrüßt Sie im Intercity 3 nach Sargans, Landquart, Ruhr.
I caused the slightly harassed waiter some consternation by asking if I could have breakfast at 11:30. That would be very much against regulations. But it's a sufficiently long time since the Maastricht cheese plank to go for a cheese course again. A nice accompaniment to the long lakeshore voyage down the Zurich Sea, 30 kilometres at water level from Talville to Wangen. As we head into the Alps proper, the Zurich Sea is followed by the fjord-like Wallensee, with its icy-looking cliff-girt waters. So rugged is the opposite northern shore that there are villages there still without road access, reachable only by boat or on foot. An hour from Zurich and it's time to hurriedly pay the bill and hop off at the junction station of Sargans. I couldn't do this challenge without a microstate, and outside the station, beneath the peak of Gonsen, there's a bright green bus to help us do that. It's a 3-minute train to bus connection, but this is Switzerland, so of course that's official and it works. We're quickly out of town on the unfortunately named Leihmobil Express bus, crossing the Young Rhine to complete country number 6. With just over half our 24 hours gone. We're out of country 6 and into the world's 6th smallest country, the Principality of Liechtenstein. Rich off questionable banking and excellent false teeth, Liechtenstein consists of a narrow bit of flat Rhine Valley floor, where nearly everyone lives, and a bulge of fearsomely precipitous mountains. Just 20 minutes from Sargans, and we're arriving in the diminutive capital, Vaduz. As soon as you get off the bus at Vaduz post office, you can glance up to see the iconic castle, home of the prince, above town. Liechtenstein is the only European post-war nation to vote to give its monarch more powers, when in 2003 the prince gently suggested he decamp to his palace in Vienna if he wasn't given veto powers. The princely initiative referendum passed by 64%. I have 15 minutes in Vaduz, enough to find out that it's ferociously clean, that it has an astoundingly ugly parliament building designed by Hanover architects and which looks like a flat-pack parliament you'd buy from IKEA, and that the tourist information wants 3 Swiss francs to stamp my passport. A final glance up to Vaduz Castle for Mrs. Turtle, who quite fancies marrying into minor European royalty. Interesting fact, in a few years the Liechtenstein royal family will technically become the heirs to the Jacobite claim to the British throne. Helpfully, we already have the same national anthem, melody-wise at least. We're on the number 11 bendy bus to Schaan, which is confusingly both Liechtenstein's second city and its largest town. The narrow stretch of green space between Vaduz and Schaan is very much a blink and you miss it affair. The number 11 is shockingly a few minutes late. There's a 4-minute connection to the number 14 at Schaan's strange circular bus station, but the driver kindly waits a few seconds for the grateful connecting passengers. Oddly, both buses are going to Feldkirch in Austria, but the 14 takes a much more direct route along the main road, so everyone making that journey hops across to save 20 minutes. At Tisses, there's still some substantial border infrastructure, though largely mothballed. While this is politically the Liechtenstein-Austria border, it's really the Swiss-Austrian border, as Switzerland manages most of Liechtenstein's external affairs, and the two have long had a customs union. Regardless of where we're crossing out of, that's little country 7 ticked off. And we're almost immediately into bustling Feldkirch, Austria's most westerly town, where our bus terminates outside the railway station. I don't know why they decorated it with elevated oval gardens on poles, but it's rather fun. Feldkirch station has, if James Joyce is to be believed, a great literary pedigree. In 1915 he'd managed to wrangle passage for himself, his wife Nora Barnacle and their children from Trieste to neutral Switzerland. At Feldkirch station he was nearly arrested by Austro-Hungarian passport officials on suspicion of spying. Had the arrest happened, he'd been unable to write Ulysses. Over there, on those tracks, the fate of Ulysses was decided in 1915, he said later. And it still says, over the station bakery. Our train onwards is a deep red railjet, the flagship trains of the Austrian railways. To my mind, they're among Europe's best frontline trains from a passenger perspective, which is just as well, as there's an afternoon and evening ahead on this train. Like us, it's come from Zurich, and is a once-a-day epic free-country connection all the way across Austria and on to Bratislava, capital of Slovakia. Beyond Bludenz, our train begins the slow climb up to the 1,300 metre Arlberg Pass, pretty much the only direct route linking the far west of Austria with the rest of the country. Plans to build a railway up and under the pass date from 1842, with the British Empire keen to establish an east-west route for traffic to Egypt. It wasn't until 1883 that it actually opened, with traffic then growing so fast the line had to be doubled just 2 years later. Out of the Arlberg tunnel and we're descending down the valley of the Rosanna, a tributary of the River Inn. That's notable because before the tunnel the rivers were draining into the Rhine and hence the North Sea. On this side they'll eventually reach the Danube and the Black Sea. At Landeck it's very tempting to hop off and take a bus from outside the station over the Reschen Pass. In less than an hour we could tick off Italy. But I think it's better to have patience. It may seem odd to be sitting on a train rolling through one country for 6 of our 24 hours, but the key is getting to another part of Europe, like the Benelux corner, where we can tick off lots of countries quickly. Obviously, slightly more if we weren't an hour behind schedule. Merci, SNCF.
Please continue using the right-hand door in direction of travel. We say goodbye to our passengers delivered here and we wish you good evening.
At Innsbruck, we couple up to another railjet set, headed for Vienna Airport. That half of the train has an Austrian Airways flight number and everything, so it can be used in lieu of a domestic flight to connect into something more long haul. We're an impressive 14 coaches and 2 locomotives long. Underneath its formidable fortress, which the Habsburgs used to bang up Hungarian political dissidents, Kufstein is a border town, and we're about to cross into Germany. The fastest rail route from Innsbruck to Salzburg is through Bavaria, the so-called Deutsches Eck, German corner, and nearly every train between those Austrian cities is a corridor train, Korridorzug, running non-stop on German rails. Obviously, this wouldn't have counted to tick off Germany. Saarbr&uuml was necessary. I'm going to pass the time in the darkness with a generous veg lasagna from Österreichische Bundesbahnen's autumn menu, ordered to my seat by app. The waitress apologised wholeheartedly that they hadn't loaded any tablecloths today. You can't miss the train's return to Austrian soil as it rumbles over the Salzach with Salzburg's unmistakable floodlit skyline laid out for our delight and delectation. Beyond Salzburg, we're racing for Vienna along the Westbahn, one of Austria's first railways, but now upgraded beyond recognition. At 200 km an hour, this is the closest we'll get to a high-speed running on this challenge. As we approach Vienna, there's a pulse-stopping announcement about a technical issue. Am I about to lose more countries? Luckily, it's in the airport portion, which is going to be detached and terminated at the Hauptbahnhof. My portion is doing just fine to head on to Slovakia. I should have been changing at Wien Hauptbahnhof an hour ago, and there's a Hungarian train waiting to connect across the platform to tempt me. No, we must push onward on this now very empty railjet. On the original schedule, I should have been waiting on that cold platform at Parndorf right now, returning from Hungary, watching this warm express race through. Never mind, in a few minutes we'll be through Kitsi, across the old Iron Curtain, and country number 8 will be ticked off. I'm about to do something a bit odd. The railjet makes 3 stops in Bratislava, and the last, Hlavna Stanica, is the one I want for my next connection. But it's a slow loop the train has to make to get there. It's faster to hop off at the first stop, Petrozelka, and hop on a frequent bus across town, especially when the connection's a bit tight. Outside the edge case of the Vatican and Rome, there isn't a pair of capitals in Europe, and quite possibly the world, as close as Vienna and Bratislava. Less than 3/4 of an hour after departing the Austrian capital, I'm at Bratislava Petrozelka, a large, somewhat bare, unloved and bleak secondary station just across the river from the centre of the Slovak capital. The single subway is almost a thing of beauty in its nakedness. I'm deliberately heading away from the main station buildings, and the subway deposits us by a busy, dark dual carriageway. I could have fiddled with an app and got a further 9 cents off the bargain 90-cent bus ticket, but it turns out the ticket machine is simple enough. Now to await the next 93 bendy bus to take us to the main station. Another advantage of taking the bus over staying on the train is getting a whistle-stop tour of this young capital's sights. After over 6 hours in the Danube's basin, we're finally crossing it on the Most SNP. That's the bridge of the Slovak National Uprising, not a tribute to Hibernian separatists. And there's floodlit Bratislava Castle, high above the river. If you want to be confused by the history of this part of the world, know that for 2 centuries the Kingdom of Hungary was ruled from this castle, or at least the residual kingdom left after the Ottomans captured Budapest. Past the new seat of power, Slovakia's presidential palace, and we're soon arriving at Hlavna Stanica, just 6 minutes by bus from Petrozelka, compared to over 20 if we'd stayed on the train. Bratislava's main station, Hlavna Stanica, divides opinion. Some point out it's cramped for both passengers and trains and has a 60s concrete protuberance stuck on its early 20th century facade. I personally love it. It has great character. It's also where, as an overexcitable 18-year-old, I set foot in the former Eastern Bloc for the first time. Back then it provided enough of a culture shock that I still hold it in affection. It may smell strongly of dope, but look at those socialist realist frescoes over the departure port. They've got a Sputnik on them and everything. We're 22 hours into the challenge in our 9th country, but if all goes well we can grab one more in this border-rich corner of Europe. Our final train is a classic European night express bearing the name Metropole, originating in Budapest and conveying coaches for 4 different destinations. I took a gamble I'd get here and splashed out €30 on a sleeper reservation in the Prague coach. Prague will be reached well past the deadline tomorrow morning, but we should be over the Czech border in time. And here's the Metropole, 15 minutes late, but we can absorb that if it doesn't grow. At the front, Polish carriages running to Warsaw. Then Hungarian carriages going to Berlin. Now my solitary Czech coach for Prague, and behind that Hungarian seating coaches that will terminate just after the border. No expansive shots of the sleeping compartment as I'm sharing with another traveller on this busy train. This coach has a slightly odd arrangement. Truth be told, it isn't really that far from Budapest to Prague, and even less so from Bratislava. So when we get to Bratislava, the other sections will disappear off to their distant destinations, while this coach will sit quietly in a siding for 6 hours before being shunted onto the front of the first Prague express of the morning. Effectively, I'm getting a hotel room in Bratislava without the need for an early alarm call. We leave Kuti, a little junction station and the last stop in Slovakia, swing sharply west and, in the darkness, rattle over the river Morava, which marks the border formed by the so-called Velvet Divorce of a month short of 30 years ago. That's Country 9 done. The good news is the Metropole hasn't lost any more time. It's just coming up to 23:25, that's 23 hours and 27 minutes since we left Eastham, and because of my rules, all I have to do to tick off my last country, the Czech Republic, is set foot on the platform at Bratislava. That's 10 countries, ticking them off at an average rate of 1 every 2 hours 20 minutes. So this is Bratislava in the Czech Republic. 10 countries in 24 hours. Not quite the 11 we were hoping for, but things worked just a little bit against us, but I still think it's an incredible achievement. I've just popped out from the middle of brushing my teeth in order to go to bed on the sleeper train, which will now sit here for a few hours before it wanders off to Prague. Welcome to Prague. My single Czech sleeping car from Budapest and in my case Bratislava has just arrived here at the main central station, Hlavní stanica. Rather than being in the middle of a train with lots of destinations as it was last night when I got to Budapest, we're now just a single carriage at the front of the morning express from Bratislava. It's been a very comfortable night. Czech Railways served me up with a very small but pleasant breakfast. I'm off in search of a second one. Catch up with you soon. So on the Charles Bridge here in the heart of historic Prague, the castle up behind us. It turns out if you want to actually see the cobblestones on Charles Bridge, come on a cold November Wednesday. Right here at the end of Europe 24, technically it ended on a freezing platform in Bratislava just before midnight last night, but this feels more like the spiritual end of it. Incredible journey. I think 8 trains, 5 buses, 1 coach, 1 tram. Obviously, and of course 10 countries. Very much hope to get 11. Unfortunately, a butterfly flapped its wings somewhere in a train maintenance depot in Alsace, which caused us to end up missing Hungary. Well, that leaves the challenge probably open, because on paper 11 countries is very much doable, but it stands at 10 for now. It's been absolute great fun. Thank you so much for coming along with me, and I'll see you on the next video, whatever that turns out to be.